an influx of podcasters, predominantly male, that get on these platforms and they're very divisive. Why do you feel like there is this divide between men, especially it seems like more so with black men and black women? Like, what is this?
What's an example of the divide you see? Because at first I thought you were talking about Kevin Samuels or Kelvin and
No,
Kevin, I forget.
no,
I don't know.
no,
So
no.
tell me what you're talking, give me an example.
So just, you get on the podcast and the guys are like, well, I need somebody like my grandma who's gonna cook and, clean and do this and do that. But then it's like it's very hypocritical because on one end they want us to be not dependent on them, but then dependent on them.
Yeah. We call that a juxtaposition.
Exactly.
Yes.
And even just our independence which in my opinion is not even independence, it's just being grown. Like us having our own as women, having our own car. You better snap it up, okay? A car, our own house.
Yeah.
We're too independent. And I'm just like, no, that's called being grown. What is that? It's really getting on my nerves.
I think two things. One, people have not been taught the skills of how to effectively communicate their vision. People have been taught how to have combat, not communion. We think that communion is just in church where we do our pass the juice and the crackers, and I used to love that. Give me a little more of that grape juice, right? That's what so many of us, and then I will gracefully say the church, capital with the capital C, has not also done an effective job, in my opinion, of educating us on real world issues and real world skills. It's more than just, ain't he all right? I need to know how to live effectively and fruitfully.
Yes.
And a part of that has been not teaching people what it means to build, what it means to create, what it means to sustain healthy relationships. So that's the first part right there.
Okay.
And I'm a part of, we're in the same generation, but the generation before us and the generation before that has failed. And the reason I say that is because people have lived in secrets and lies. Back in 1862, 92, Paul Laurence Dunbar, he was a prolific writer. If you don't know him, I encourage you to look him up. He wrote a poem, and I'm just going to read an excerpt of it. It's called The Mask. And he says, we were the mask that grins and lies and hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. He says, this debt we pay with human guile. He says, with torn and bleeding hearts, we smile. He says, why should the world be ever wise in counting all our tears and hearing our sighs? Nay, nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. And that was in the 1800s when you do just some etymology of, I appreciate your affirmation. That was in the 1800s, and when you do from an etymological standpoint and unpacking where that came from, you see he was talking to people who were recently freed from slavery. And it was a survival apparatus. They would laugh and smile and grin even though they weren't happy. Yes, sir, how you doing today? It was a survival skill. But that was in the 1800s. That began to be a pathology, a big fancy word for pattern that is perpetuated from generation to generation of mask wearing. So when people like the brother says, I want you to be like my grandma, he don't know the wounds your grandmother carried because many grandmothers wore the mask. That's why I'm tying it back around somewhere. Many parents wore the mask. But many of us have not been taught, we haven't seen, we haven't had the models of what it means to be effective communicators, effective lovers. We don't know what it means to be tender. Because if, in fact, you want your person, your partner to be a certain way, there's a way you can tenderly communicate that. Not going on a podcast bashing somebody.